In 2008, Jeremy Clarkson bought 1,000 acres of Oxfordshire land for £6 million. Year one profit was $144. People laughed. Today, that same farm is tied to a $45 million valuation. Because it wasn't just a farm, it was a machine. And by the end of this, the only question left is how a place this chaotic became more valuable every time it looked like it was falling apart. Jeremy Clarkson did not arrive at farming with quiet competence. He arrived with confidence, impatience, and a tractor he could drive but not really operate. The machine had 3 gear levers, 2 brake pedals, and 8,000 buttons, some of them in German. That is not experience. That is a hostage situation. And yet he kept going. That was the first clue that Diddley Squat was never going to behave like a normal farm. It was going to behave like a story. The first lesson was simple in theory and ridiculous in practice. Attach a tractor to a cultivator. The process required pins, link arms, engine-off safety checks, and a level of mechanical patience Clarkson did not naturally possess. He kept trying to solve it from the cab. He kept trying to skip the ladder. He kept trying to force the problem to become smaller than it was. That never works on a farm. It does, however, make excellent television. Because this wasn't really about farming equipment. It was about watching a man discover that the countryside does not care about his personality. And here is where it gets interesting. The whole operation began to reveal its real shape. The tractor was not the business. The soil was not the business. The business was the friction between ambition and reality. That is not farming. That is entertainment. Once the cultivator was finally attached, the day moved into actual work. The point of the machine was to loosen the top layer of soil so seeds could be planted into better ground later. Practical, necessary, unromantic. But the lesson was bigger than the machinery. Every inch of land had a purpose, and every job existed because another job depended on it. That is the hidden truth of the whole farm. It looks like chaos. It behaves like a system. Clarkson then got his first real driving lesson in 42 years. First gear. Slow, careful, controlled. He announced that he was farming, and for a brief moment he meant it. The field responded the way fields do, silently, without applause, but with visible results. That is the addictive part. You can see progress on a farm. You can also see stupidity. The same day, a neighboring farmer's harvest blaze reminded everyone how fragile agriculture really is. One broken piece of equipment, one bad moment, and an entire season can become smoke. The danger was real. The stakes were real. And Clarkson's response was the exact response you would expect from someone who had just realized that competence is not optional in farming. He kept moving. That's the point most viewers miss. The comedy sits on top of something much harsher. Farming is not a hobby with better scenery. It is a business where errors cost money. Weather kills margins, and time punishes vanity. Then the weather changed, the work changed, and Caleb Cooper changed the entire rhythm of the story. Caleb had already been there. That matters. He was not cast. He was not manufactured. He was the person who knew the ground, knew the machinery, and knew exactly how hard the land would push back. When he walked into frame, the whole farm suddenly had a pulse. Clarkson was the face. Caleb was the operating system. That is a very different thing. The helicopter moment made that even clearer. Caleb had never been in the air before, never watched a James Bond film, never left the ground like that. So when he finally rose over the farm, what he noticed was not glamour. He noticed mistakes, missed strips, bad lines, uneven work. From above, the farm became a map of human imperfection, and Caleb saw everything. That is why he works so well on screen. He is not pretending to be impressed by the dream. He is checking whether the dream actually functions. The dream, in this case, had a name, a budget, and a future. The same future that turned a patch of land into a far bigger commercial story than anyone expected. Clarkson started looking at the unfarmed side of the property and saw blackberries. Not hedges, not weeds, money. At 6p a berry, every bush became a tiny revenue stream. Suddenly, the unused margins of the farm looked like a harvest waiting to happen. That is the genius move. Most people see land. He saw inventory. And that shift matters because it proves the entire project had two farms running at once. One farm produced crops, the other produced narrative. One side dealt with soil, the other dealt with attention. The farm shop made that obvious. It began with 44,000 pounds in assets and jumped to 1.34 million pounds in its first year. That is not a small success story. That is a signal that people were not only watching the farm, they were buying the world around it. The cues proved it. The council did not